My dear friends, thank you so much for continuing on this journey with me. It's been so lovely to read your comments and to receive your feedback. Thank you so much for taking the time to reach out to me. I want to wrap up this section on the commandment that John is talking about today. It's typical of John that he uses light and darkness, and he uses the image of love and hate. This dualism is very typical of him, and in a very real sense, it serves a perfect purpose for him. Remember, John is writing these words to a community. They will be read out, so he's trying to make his letter a speech act. It's not just to be read and noted. He is writing it to hit home to the very core of the being of the people who will hear it. John is reminding his people that because of the incarnation of Jesus, that is, the birth and life of Jesus, the light is already shining and the darkness, therefore, is passing away. Anyone who has been awake just before the dawn knows what it's like to see the transformation from night to day, from darkness to light. I've been in caves when the lights are turned out and the darkness is overwhelming. When you turn on a light, all the darkness is not dispersed, but you can see. There are still places that are dark, and there are places that are illuminated by the light. And in one sense, Jesus has done this. There is still darkness in the world. For John, this is the parts of the world that have not accepted Jesus. Some of us may say that this is the world of sin, but I think that this is too simplistic. Remember, the word for sin in Greek means simply to miss the mark. And while that may entail doing something wrong, it more accurately means failing to reach the standard that you're after. I think this is exemplified here in the passage in 1 John 2, verses 7 to 11. Let's hear what John has to say. Beloved, I am writing to you no new commandment, but an old commandment that you had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word that you have heard. At the same time, it is a new commandment that I am writing to you, which is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. Whoever says that they are in the light and hates their brother or sister is still in the darkness. Whoever loves their brother or sister abides in the light, and in them there is no cause for stumbling. But whoever hates their brother or sister is in the darkness and walks in the darkness and does not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded their eyes. Light represents being in a relationship with Jesus. Darkness is not being in a relationship with Jesus. This is called a dualism. These are two diametrically opposed states, light and dark, love and hate, good and evil. These are typical for John. They serve his purpose in that they are easy to show the difference and to make his points for him. When we are in the dark, we are more prone to stumble and fall. When we're not in a relationship with Jesus, then we're in spiritual darkness. For John, this means we will stumble about in our lives. For John, it is simple to state that the people who do not have a relationship with Jesus are obviously in the dark. However, for those who claim to have a relationship with Jesus, they must be walking in the light, right? Maybe not. It is clear from a forensic analysis of 1 John, that we will not go into here, that there has been some dissension in the community of faith that John is writing to. In fact, the dissension has been so great that there has been a split in the faith community. So the question then becomes for John, how do you detect whether a person who says that they are a follower of Jesus, and therefore should be walking in the light, and therefore not falling short of the mark, not stumbling and falling about, how do you detect if they really are a follower of Jesus? For John, it is about how people in the community of faith relate to one another. Do they relate to each other in love, or do they relate to each other in hate? However, while this dualism is great for John, in his argument, in the letter, For you and me, we need to be a little bit more discerning for our situation. The Greek term missio, which we translate here as hate, can also be translated as contempt or disregard. Thus, it seems that to simply translate it as hate is to miss the mark, or to put it in theological terms, to sin in our translation. One could say that I don't hate someone, but if I hold them in contempt or disregard them, which is just as valid translations, then for John, and for us, we could actually say that they are really fulfilling the meaning of the verb. You see, it's very much like in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says, "You have heard it said of old, do not commit adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks with lustful intent on another person has committed adultery in their heart." Just because you haven't done the deed doesn't mean you haven't transgressed or missed the mark in behaviour. And so it is with missio. One might not hate, but if one holds another person in contempt or disregards them, then I think it's safe to say that they have missed the mark. They have sinned. So we could then translate verses 9 to 11 a bit like this. Whoever says that they are in the light and yet have contempt for or disregards or ignores their brother or sister is still in darkness. Whoever loves their brother or sister abides in the light, and in them there is no cause for stumbling. But whoever has contempt or disregards or ignores their brother or sister is not walking in the life of Jesus, because they are walking in the darkness, and they do not know where they are going, because the darkness has blinded their eyes from seeing the path that Jesus has laid before them. Puts a whole different complexion on it, doesn't it? Contempt has a whole set of synonyms too. It can also be translated as dislike, or disdain, or disapproval, or derision. Synonyms for disregard include pay no attention, forget about, or simply forget. Synonyms for ignore include look through, overlook, or pass over. It's a whole lot of different ways to ultimately be hating our brother or sister, and therefore not be walking in the way of Jesus. I don't know about you, but when I look at the list, I feel a whole lot less comfortable in my assessment that I do not hate. I think it was a bit like that for the disciples and those listening to Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, when he reflected on adultery, and then he also reflected on murder. They were feeling pretty smug to start off with. Yeah, haven't done that, Lord. But then when Jesus got to the heart of the matter, they're going, okay, maybe I've done that. When we hold a person in contempt or disregard them or ignore them, or any of the other related synonyms that we do not know how to, any other related synonyms, we do not know how to live our life in Christ properly, because darkness clouds our vision and we cannot see properly where to walk, and we end up falling over ourselves in our relationship with God and with one another. Not only does this have an impact on us personally, it impacts us on our communities of faith. It cannot help but to impact negatively on our faith communities, because after all, it's all about interpersonal relationships, isn't it? In my introduction to the letter a few weeks ago, I made the observation that Isaiah 58 is very much in mind for John. The reality is that the conflict in the faith community, which we call the church, has resulted in the community that is the church becoming weak and ineffective for John. This was the problem that Isaiah was also addressing in chapter 58, and I think why John had it in mind. The people of God were complaining to God that they were a weakened community, no longer effective or suffering from all sorts of other issues. Their complaint to God was, well, God, look, we've been doing all the right religious stuff. We've been going to the temple, going to the synagogue. We've been fasting, offering all the sacrifices, doing all the religious stuff, the outward signs that an outsider would identify us as being your people. So what's going wrong, God? God's reply through Isaiah is pretty blunt. You have been ignoring the people in your community of faith. You have not loosed the bonds of wickedness. You have not let loose those who are oppressed go free. You have not broken the yoke. That is anything that stops a person from being themselves. You've not broken that and helped them to be free. In terms of John, you're hating or showing contempt or disregarding your sister and brother who are in need. You've concentrated on the religiosity, but have ignored the relationality. God says, it's not the fast I require that you're doing, but the fast that I do require is that you share your food with the hungry, you clothe those who are naked, and you provide shelter for the homeless. I see in our churches and in my diocese a weakened community of faith. We say to God, we've been going to church, we've been saying our prayers, we've been doing all the outward signs that people would identify with us as Anglicans. So what's going on? We have to start looking at our attitudes to one another. Do we see people in our faith community burdened? So many burdens out there, but we do not seek to lighten them. Do we see them yoked to a crappy job, a relationship, or something else in their life, and do not seek to ease the burden by coming alongside them and comforting them and encouraging them? Do we see them struggling with issues in their lives and not seek to come alongside them and love them? This is hard to do, but it is what we're called by God to do with those whom we claim to be a part of our church and our faith communities. It seems to me that it's easier to be critical and judgmental and indifferent than to be loving and to be kind and compassionate. Such attitudes such as indifference and judgmentalism require no input to the problem from us, except to make it harder for those around us and to make us feel self-righteous and superior because we're not like them. I can tell you those outside our churches, outside of our communities of faith, because I speak to them, see our attitudes and more in us, and they will not come to us and be a part of us when we hold such attitudes. They are already struggling with all these realities in their lives, and they are looking for comfort and encouragement. But they say to me, why would I come into your community of faith if I only see judgment and condemnation and self-righteousness? It's a pretty hard reflection. And they say that to me because they see us treating our own people who are in our own community, who we are supposed to love, with the various means of hatred. So why would they come and join the happy band of pilgrims? And I think sometimes the happy band of pilgrims aren't so happy themselves. We're a bit like the church of Sardis in Revelation 3. We think we're alive, but we're not. We're on the brink of death. And if we do not bring back to life that which is almost dead, we're in danger of dying completely. It seems to me that we have to try and somehow rediscover what Jesus talks about in Revelation 2. To the church in Ephesus, Jesus says, you need to rediscover your first love. Jesus, the light, is in the world, but only through us, and the light is overcoming the darkness, but only when we share the light of Jesus in our part of the world by the love that we have in our relationship with Jesus. We need to shake off our fear, fix our eyes anew upon Jesus, and to rediscover afresh our first love for Jesus, and to live that love out courageously in our faith communities. We need to discover anew how to love one another, truly caring for one another, seeking to come alongside those in need, both within our community and outside our community. We cannot do this by sitting in our pews or in our church groups and expecting people to come to us. We need to go out with boldness and with courage to seek the people who are stranded on the side of the road of life and encourage them afresh to come and see Jesus in love and compassion for God's creation and God's image. For God's creation and God's image is what each and every one of us are. The Lord be with you.